The knife's rhythm over the cutting board was steady. Onions, bell pepper, zucchini, like the quiet tick of a shop clock after the guys have gone home and the radio is off. Ryan Miller's Tuesday looked the same as any other. Work boots by the door, mail tossed on the counter, skillet warming, a beer sweating on the stovetop. His phone buzzed once, then kept buzzing. A long message slowly unspooling like a line coming off a reel. He wiped his hands on a dish towel, thumbed the screen, and read, "Emily, I need space. Please don't contact me until I'm ready. I just need time to think, and I hope you can respect that." There were more words, therapized sentences that sounded borrowed, like a script someone slid across a table. He read it twice, not because he didn't understand, but because the quiet in the room tilted. The skillet hissed, oil spitting, and he cut the heat, set the pan aside, tasted onion and metal at the back of his throat. The first feeling was confusion, clean and simple, like finding a light switched on in an empty garage. 2 years together. Their routines fit like drawers in a tool chest, her yoga mat rolled in the corner, his jacket on the same hook, Saturday mornings at the flea market arguing about which cast iron skillet had the best seasoning. No screaming matches, no slam doors, no warning shot. Just a text that turned a shared life into a hallway with only one set of footsteps. Ryan put the phone face down and stood still long enough to hear the apartment's bones. Pipes settling, the hum of the fridge, a neighbor's television bleeding through the drywall. Anger showed up quick and hot, but he refused it in the driver's seat. He'd seen what men looked like when they let their temper steer. Sloppy, loud, pathetic. He had nothing to throw, nothing to break. The only thing he was interested in breaking was a habit, chasing, pleading, getting talked into circles by someone who'd already decided to walk. He rinsed the vegetables, slid them into the trash, and cleaned the cutting board as if a health inspector were watching. Order first, then the rest. On the couch, he typed a reply and deleted it. Typed another, "We should talk in person," deleted that too. He set the phone on the coffee table and took a pen and an old receipt, wrote one line in block letters, and taped it to the fridge. Respect the boundary. It wasn't for her. It was for him. If she wanted space, he could give it better than she knew existed. The next 2 days stretched like winter roads. He went to work, came home, cooked simple, lifted in the building's sad little gym with cables that squeaked and a mirror that added 10 years and 10 pounds. He moved quietly in his own place like he was relearning where the furniture sat. When his hand drifted toward the phone, he stopped it cold. He wasn't going to feed a fire and then call the smoke an accident. At night, he replayed their timeline, not the highlight reel, the mechanics. Who initiated plans? Who canceled? Who said, "Do you mind if I keep a few things here?" And saw a closet open like a door to the future. He remembered little tells he'd ignored because they were easy to ignore. The way she kept certain corners of herself gated off, the maybe later promises, the casual way she'd say, "You know I hate drama," right before walking him to the edge of it. He checked the lease, his name alone. Not a power trip, just paperwork. He thought about how often that word got used to knock a man off balance. Space. Not a real request, not the adult thing. "I'm done." Just a gray net tossed over a man's head to keep him still while someone else rearranged their options. The realization didn't make him flinch. It made things precise. Men build and fix and measure. Precision is a kind of mercy. On Thursday, he set rules. No contact. No watching her socials. No letting friends run reconnaissance and bring back poison disguised as information. He wrote those out too and stuck them beside the first note. The apartment started to feel like a shop again. Tools put away, floor swept, nothing lying around to trip over. He slept better the second night. Not good, but better. In the morning, he made coffee in the dented percolator he refused to replace. The smell filled the kitchen, and for the first time since the text, the room didn't feel like a verdict. He wasn't choosing surrender, he was choosing control. Those are not the same thing. By Friday lunch, he had his week squared away. Overtime if the foreman offered, weekend list ready, laundry, oil change, reorganize the hall closet, maybe pressure wash the balcony. A man's mind clears when his hands are moving, and if there's prayer in that, it's a quiet kind. He looked once at the phone, then away, and felt the anger settle into something solid and useful, the way heat becomes steel when you've got the patience to stand by the forge. If space was what she wanted, he'd give it form and weight. He'd build it with silence and respect, and if that silence turned into something ugly, he wouldn't be the one who made it so. He poured the last of the coffee, set the mug in the sink, and went to work. The apartment door clicked behind him. His door, his place, his breath steady, while a simple truth wrote itself in the back of his head in letters as plain as the ones on his fridge. Space is never just space. It's a line you draw and then defend. Friday afternoon, the job wrapped early. Ryan clocked out, washed concrete dust from his hands at the shop sink, and drove home with the radio off. The quiet didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like putting a tool back where it belonged. He made a sandwich, sat at the small kitchen table, and let his phone run headlines and baseball scores past his eyes like fishing line. He wasn't looking for her. He'd written that rule in thick letters and taped it to his fridge. But algorithms aren't gentlemen, and mutual friends don't know when to mind their business. The photo hit his feed like a boot to a rotted stare. Emily, hair loose and sunlit, legs tangled with Jordan haze on a perfect blue water island. His arm was around her waist like he was claiming property. 2 cocktails sweating on a teak table. A white sand beach. Her laugh caught mid-breath, close enough to hear even though the sound was off. The account wasn't hers. It was a mutual, the kind of friend who lives for posting other people's lives with captions that feel like gossip wearing perfume. The words under the picture were a knife with a bow on it. Reunited and it feels like home. #Island Week 3 slides. One of them in a hammock. Another, Emily's hand in Jordan's, fingers laced. The timestamp at the top, posted 15 minutes ago. Geotag, the kind of place you book when you want your phone to do the bragging for you. Ryan didn't blink for a long breath. The anger rose fast, an honest thing hot enough to fog his vision. He put the phone down. He didn't throw it. He didn't pace. He stood, rinsed his plate, set it in the rack, and dried his hands like he was prepping for a clean job. When he sat again, the heat had settled into a hard line behind his ribs. He picked up the phone and looked only once more, careful as a man checking a live wire. Same picture, same caption, same proof that space meant vacation with an X while you keep the lights on at home. He screenshotted it and dropped the images into a folder he named Receipts. Not because he planned to humiliate anybody online, he didn't air laundry, clean or dirty. Because paperwork is how men keep lies from walking around as facts. He clicked on the profile. He didn't scroll. He didn't count days. He didn't look for more. If there were more, they'd find him. They always do. He backed out and set the phone face down, chest rising and settling like a man after the last heavy rep. Of all the ways to learn, this one had a certain clean cruelty. No teary speech. No long circular conversation where words get bent into shapes that only make sense to the person bending them. No one says you're overreacting, while your gut whispers you're not reacting enough. Just a public postcard from the truth. Reunited, while you stare at an empty chair across your own table. He walked to the fridge and read his notes. Respect the boundary. No contact. No socials. He'd stuck to the first 2 perfectly. The third, technically, he hadn't gone looking. The picture had come to him like a summons. Clarity, delivered by a smiling stranger and a hashtags list. Ugly but exact. He poured water, took a long drink, and started putting the week together like a detective without the hat. The Tuesday text. The silence that followed. The way she'd chosen the most frictionless exit. A request that turns a man into his own jailer if he lets it. If you don't contact me, I don't have to say anything I can be held to later. He'd honored it, and in the gap she'd sprinted. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was design. He didn't feel stupid. He felt used. There's a difference. Stupid is blind. Used is when you see the hand moving the pieces a second too late and decide that'll be the last time. On the counter sat his spare keys, 1 brass, 1 dull steel, on a split ring he'd meant to replace. He set a finger on them the way a carpenter checks grain. With attention, he didn't rush to a conclusion. He built one. The apartment belonged to him alone. The lease said so. The bills said so. The door, the deadbolt, the windows, the garage clicker. Every inch of it was his name, his payment, his responsibility. He'd invited her into that space the way a man opens a door to weather. Welcome when it's warm, tolerable when it's rough, but you don't leave it open in a storm. He thought about calling her, purely to say he knew. The idea died in the same breath. He wasn't going to give her the gift of a fight she could narrate to friends as crazy. He wasn't going to play the villain in a story written by the person who caused the damage. A man's reputation isn't what other people say. It's the trail of his choices. He'd keep his choices precise. He went to the hall closet. Top shelf. A folder with his lease, insurance, and the car title he kept taped inside in a plastic sleeve because he'd learned the hard way what unpaid paperwork turns into. He opened the folder, touched the lease, and felt the same steadiness he got from a level finding true. His place. His rules. Back at the table, he turned the phone over and opened his notes app. No calls. No messages. No answers. Block if necessary. Lawyer if they escalate. Replace the locks. Inventory everything that isn't hers. Gather anything that is hers. Box it. Label it. No drama. He didn't need to breathe. His breathing had already evened out. He didn't need to write. Don't explain himself. He wasn't going to. He wrote one more line anyway, because words on a page are promises to yourself. I'm not a placeholder. The room looked the same. Table, chair, the dented percolator he refused to replace, but it felt different. Not smaller, cleaner. He imagined the door, the threshold where courtesy ends and ownership begins. People talk a lot about love like it's a river. They don't talk enough about boundaries like they're dams. You don't build them to stop everything. You build them so what passes through doesn't wash your life away. His phone buzzed again. This time a buddy from the crew, sending a meme about the foreman's temper. The normal world was still turning, blessedly dumb and regular. Ryan sent a thumbs up and put the phone aside. The clarity that came with the photo wasn't a shout. It was a switch clicking over. He didn't need her reasons, and he damn sure didn't need her permission. If Emily wanted space, she had it. If she wanted to fill it with a man who smiled for cameras on beaches, that was her right. But she wasn't going to do it on his dime, in his doorway, or with his keys. He stood, rinsed his glass, wiped the counter, and checked the bolt on the door out of habit. Plan first, emotion second. He wasn't going to yell. He wasn't going to beg. He wasn't going to warn. He was going to act. Quietly, precisely, and entirely within the lines that protect a man's peace. He touched the keys once more and felt the decision settle. He wouldn't play backup in his own apartment. Saturday morning came gray and ordinary. The kind of sky that makes men mow their lawns or change their oil because it feels like a workday even when it isn't. Ryan rolled out of bed early, coffee brewing in the dented percolator. The same mug he'd been using since college sitting on the counter. He drank it black, leaning against the counter, watching steam curl up like smoke signals from a fire only he could see. The photo of Emily and Jordan was still sharp in his mind, but it no longer felt like an open wound. It felt like instructions. When people show you who they are, the smartest thing you can do is believe them. She had asked for space, and he was going to deliver it in steel and brass. At 9 o'clock sharp, he called a locksmith. His voice was steady, businesslike, the way he sounded when ordering new parts at the shop. 2 locks, front door and deadbolt. Today, if you can. The guy showed up in a white van with faded lettering, toolbox in hand, nodding like he'd been through 100 breakups without ever hearing a word. He didn't ask questions, didn't make small talk. Ryan respected that. Some men are smart enough to know their job is to fix, not to pry. Ryan stood back while the old lock came out, screws clattering into a small tray. The locksmith whistled under his breath, not a tune, just air moving through a man used to silence. In less than 20 minutes, the door had new hardware, heavier, cleaner, shinier than the last. The locksmith handed Ryan 2 new keys, fresh cut, edges sharp enough to snag a pocket if you weren't careful. You'll want to toss the old ones, the locksmith said. Ryan nodded. Already planned on it. When the van pulled away, Ryan sat at the small table with the keys in his palm. He turned them once, twice, studying the shine. Then he walked to the trash can, dropped the old keys in, and listened to them rattle against empty aluminum cans. It was the sound of something finished. He exhaled, long and steady, like a man letting go of a weight he'd been carrying in his chest all week. For the first time since Tuesday night, his shoulders eased. His jaw was unclenched. He wasn't waiting anymore, waiting for her call, waiting for her explanation, waiting for something that would never come. The locks weren't just metal. They were a decision. He tested the new key in the deadbolt twice, the click echoing sharp and final. The chain latch hung easy. The peephole stared back empty. His apartment had never been a fortress, but now it was his again, every inch of it. The rules had been reset, and he was the only one who got to write them. Anger didn't drive him at that moment. Control did. Anger burns out. Control lasts. The quiet in the apartment wasn't hollow anymore. It was earned. He grabbed a notebook, wrote down the locksmith's number, the receipt, and the key's cut code, and filed it in his folder beside the lease and the car title. Paperwork, locks, lines. This is how men defend themselves without raising their voices. That afternoon he walked the block, picked up groceries, nodded to neighbors. Nobody knew anything had shifted, but Ryan carried himself differently. More upright, more certain. The kind of posture you see in a man who knows his doors lock from the inside, and that's all that matters. When he came back, he turned the key once more, heard the bolt snap into place, and smiled. She had wanted space. Now she had exactly that, on the other side of a door she could no longer open. The apartment door clicked shut behind him, keys solid in his pocket. That sound, the clean bite of a new lock, still carried weight every time. But Saturday wasn't finished. Ryan had another loose end to cut, one that sat in the parking lot like a lie on four wheels. The Mazda CX-5 gleamed under a thin layer of dust. Months ago, Emily had paraded it as hers, hanging air fresheners, tossing shoes in the back, filling the glove box with gum wrappers and receipts from overpriced coffee runs. She called it "my car," so often that even her sister parroted the phrase. But Ryan knew the truth. His name was on the paperwork. The title sat in his folder at home, printed in black ink that never lies. He'd bought it after Emily's old sedan gave up the ghost, reasoning it was easier for both of them if she had something safe and reliable. But easier isn't the same as permanent. He slid into the driver's seat. The smell hit him first. Her perfume, faint and fading, mixed with the chemical tang of vinyl. He turned the ignition, the engine purring steady, no hesitation. A good car, but it wasn't hers. And now it wasn't going to be his problem either. The dealership was half an hour away, glass-fronted and humming with the Saturday crowd. Salesmen in polos circling the lot like sharks that smiled too wide. Ryan walked in carrying the folder under his arm. "Thinking about trading in?" the salesman asked, all bright teeth. "Selling outright," Ryan replied, voice flat as a level. The salesman blinked, then nodded, ushering him to a desk. Ryan laid out the paperwork like a mechanic setting tools. Title, registration, ID. Everything matched. No questions left open. The appraisal took less than 15 minutes. They lowballed him at first, of course, they always do. He didn't raise his voice, didn't argue, just leaned back, crossed his arms, and let the silence press. Men like him know that sometimes the best hammer in the box is patience. When the number crept up to something fair, he signed. The pen dug a clean line across the page. By the time he handed over the keys, the relief wasn't joy, it was subtraction. A problem removed, a string cut. He walked out lighter than he'd walked in, folded under his arm, checked in his wallet. Driving his old Chevy back, he felt a satisfaction sharper than any confrontation could have given him. Emily's car wasn't hers in any legal sense, but in her mind it had been a symbol of control, her ride, her independence, her bragging right. Now it was gone, and the parking lot back at the complex would tell the story better than any words ever could. When he parked the Chevy in his spot that evening, he glanced at the empty space beside it, the one Emily always claimed. Bare asphalt, nothing more. For months it had been filled with the illusion of ownership. Now it was clean, quiet, proof that paperwork speaks louder than declarations. Upstairs, he filed the sales receipt in his folder. Title transferred. Check deposited. Done. He stacked the folder back on the shelf, next to the lease and the locksmith receipt, each page a stone in a wall she couldn't climb. That night, he sat on the couch with a beer, lights low, the apartment humming steady around him. No dramatic soundtrack, no grand applause. Just the peace that comes when a man finishes what he started. The Mazda had been the last piece of blurred territory between them, the last item she could point at and claim. Now it was stripped clean. Out the window, the empty parking space stared back at him. Eerie, maybe, but also satisfying. A reminder that the life he was building again was smaller, tighter, but fully his. Emily had called it hers. But paperwork never lies. Sunday afternoon, the apartment was quiet except for the low hum of the AC and the tick of the wall clock. Ryan sat at his table with a legal pad, working through a list, small things that needed doing around the place. Replace the bathroom light fixture. Patch the chip in the drywall near the entryway. Nothing urgent, just a man keeping his space in order. He was halfway through sketching out a grocery list when the first bang hit the door. It was sharp, impatient, the kind of knock that wasn't asking, it was demanding. Then a pause, then more, louder this time. Ryan didn't flinch. He set his pen down, stood, and looked through the peephole. Emily, hair tied up, sunglasses on top of her head, suitcase at her feet. She jabbed her key into the lock once, twice, 3 times, confusion giving way to panic as it didn't budge. She swore under her breath, then knocked again. Harder. Ryan, open the damn door. He slid the chain latch into place and cracked the door just enough for her to see his face. Calm, steady. She didn't like that, her eyes narrowed immediately. What the hell is this? She snapped, rattling the knob. You asked for space, Ryan said evenly. This is space. Her voice rose. Don't play smart with me. My key isn't working. Did you change the locks? He didn't answer right away. Just let the silence do its work. The way a mechanic lets a seized bolt sit in penetrating oil until it loosens on its own. She shoved the door, but the chain held. Ryan, this is insane. You can't just lock me out of my own apartment. He let a faint smile show. Our lease is in my name. Always has been. Her jaw tightened. You're unbelievable. I go away for a week and you. A week? He cut in. His voice was quiet but hard enough to stop her mid-sentence. That's what you're calling it? For the first time since he'd cracked the door, her expression faltered. Just a flicker, but enough. Before she could recover, he tilted his head toward the parking lot. By the way, your car isn't out there. It never was your car. Paperwork says otherwise. Her eyes widened. She stepped back, nearly tripping over her suitcase. You sold it. Ryan didn't blink. I sold my car. The one I bought. The one in my name. The one you like to decorate and call yours. Her voice pitched into a shriek. You had no right. Every right, he replied. The title was in my folder, not yours. The hallway echoed with her breathing. Fast. Uneven. She grabbed her phone from her bag, thumbs flying, muttering, I'm calling Brooke. Ryan leaned against the doorframe, chain still firm. Go ahead. 10 minutes later, Brooke appeared, red-faced and already wounded tight. She stood beside Emily, arms crossed, glaring at Ryan through the narrow gap. This is insane, Brooke barked. You can't just lock her out like she's some stranger. Ryan's voice stayed low, steady, almost conversational. She asked for no contact. She got it. She wanted space. She got that too. Brooke scoffed. She didn't mean this kind of space. Don't twist it. Ryan shook his head. I'm not twisting anything. I respected her words. Maybe more than she did. Emily's face flushed, part rage, part humiliation. She slammed her palm against the door. Ryan, stop being petty and open the damn door. We need to talk. You had your talk, he said, calm as stone. You just sent it by text. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the rattle of Emily's suitcase handle as she yanked it upright. Brooke muttered something under her breath, but Ryan didn't catch it. He didn't need to. Here's how it's going to be, he said finally. Your stuff's boxed. When you and your family want to collect it, you'll find it ready. But you don't come back here with keys that don't belong to you. You don't bang on my door like you own the lease. That chapter's over. Emily opened her mouth, but he closed the door fully, the chain sliding free, the deadbolt snapping into place. Her muffled voice rose in the hallway. Accusations, demands, but he didn't answer. He walked back to the table, picked up his pen, and returned to his list. Through the peephole, he watched them finally drag the suitcase down the hall, Brooke's arm around Emily's shoulders. Their voices faded, swallowed by the stairwell. Ryan wrote one more line at the bottom of his list. Space means silence. Hold the line. For the first time since Tuesday night, he felt the words settle in his chest like a foundation stone. He wasn't angry, not the kind of anger that boils over. He was steady, resolved. She wanted space, and now she had more than she'd ever bargained for. The knock came mid-morning on Monday, softer than Emily's pounding the day before, but carrying the same weight of intrusion. Ryan had been expecting it. He'd spent half of Sunday night preparing, sorting, folding, stacking, sealing. The living room looked more like a moving company's staging area than a home. Cardboard boxes lined against the wall, each one taped, labeled in black marker. Clothes, shoes, bathroom, odds and ends. He'd done the job with the same care he gave wiring a panel, methodical, precise, no shortcuts. Through the peephole, he saw them. Brooke, Emily's sister, jaw set like she was ready for war. And Karen, their mother, holding a large handbag and wearing the face of someone already convinced she was the injured party. No, Emily, not this time. Just the cavalry. Ryan opened the door, standing in the frame with his arms loose at his sides. Morning. Karen got straight to the point. We're here for Emily's things. Ryan nodded toward the boxes stacked neatly behind him. All ready. I'll bring them out. Brooke tried to shoulder past him. We'll get them ourselves. He stepped sideways, blocking her path without raising his voice. No need. Nobody's crossing this threshold but me. She's not on the lease. Neither are you. Brooke's face flushed. You're being ridiculous. No, Ryan said, calm as bedrock. I'm being careful. He picked up the first two boxes and set them just outside the doorway. The women stared at them like they were evidence in a trial. Karen's lip trembled. After everything she did for you, this is how you treat her? Ryan tilted his head, letting the words hang. Everything she did for me? His tone stayed even, but the steel underneath was clear. She asked for space. She took a vacation with her ex. She left her mess for me to clean up. Now I'm finishing it. Karen huffed, shaking her head. Marriage is about forgiveness. We weren't married, Ryan replied, lowering another box by the door. And forgiveness isn't the same thing as giving someone the keys to walk all over you. Brooke bent to grab a box, muttering, You're pathetic. You know that? Throwing her out like garbage. Garbage goes in a dumpster, Ryan said flatly. These are her things, packed with care. Folded, taped, labeled. You'll find nothing damaged. The silence after that was sharp, broken only by the sound of tape peeling as he stacked another carton at their feet. Ryan didn't look at their faces. He focused on the work, box after box until the wall inside his living room was clear and the hall was cluttered with the remnants of a life she'd chosen to abandon. Karen sniffled as Brooke started hauling the boxes down the hall, muttering about lawyers, decency, betrayal. Ryan let it slide off him. A man doesn't argue with someone who's already written the script. He just finished the job. When the last box left his hand, he dusted his palms, nodded once, and closed the door. No shouting, no drama, just a door shutting on what no longer belonged. Inside, the apartment looked stripped in places. Bare hangers in the closet, empty shelf space where her books once sat, the bathroom counter reduced to his razor and toothbrush. It should have felt hollow. Instead, it felt clean, like cauterizing a wound. Ugly for a moment, but the only way to stop the bleeding. Ryan poured himself a glass of water, leaned against the counter, and listened to the muffled sound of boxes being loaded into an SUV outside. He didn't move to the window, didn't watch them leave. When the noise faded, he rinsed the glass, set it in the sink, and looked around at what remained. Every corner, every wall, every drawer that was still his, that was the closure. Not in shouting, not in tears, not in begging someone to stay who had already gone. Closure comes in cardboard, taped and stacked by the door, carried away by the same people who thought they could break a man by removing him from his own life. But Ryan wasn't broken. He was lighter. The week after the boxes left was quieter than Ryan expected. He went to work, clocked in, clocked out, fixed what needed fixing. Evenings were steady, laundry, groceries, the hum of the percolator. For a while, it almost felt done. But lies don't stay boxed up. They travel faster than the truth, and Emily had always been good at playing the victim. It started with a text from an old friend. "Man, what happened? Heard you threw Emily out with nothing." Then another. "Bro, seriously? Selling her car? That's low." Ryan didn't reply. He knew what was happening. She was spinning the story, painting herself as blindsided, abandoned, a poor girl tossed to the curb by the heartless boyfriend. By midweek, his landlord called. "Ryan, I got a noise complaint from another tenant. Say you've been yelling, throwing things. Is everything okay over there?" Ryan almost laughed. His apartment was as quiet as a workshop at midnight. "Come by and see for yourself," he said. "The place is cleaner than it's ever been." The landlord paused, uneasy. "Yeah, I figured. Just had to check." That night, Ryan sat at the table with his folder open. Lease, locksmith receipt, car sale papers, screenshots of Instagram posts, dated and geotagged. He slid them into a new sleeve labeled Emily documentation. A man doesn't fight lies with louder lies. He fights them with paper, dates, and evidence. The next day, Jordan Hayes tried his hand. A message request popped up on one of Ryan's socials. "You didn't have to treat her that way. She deserves better." Ryan stared at the words for a long second. Jordan. The ex-turned island fling. The man smiling in the hammock photo. Talking about what she deserved. He hit the block without typing a single word. Some men earn the dignity of a response. Jordan wasn't one of them. The smear campaign picked up steam. Friends went cold. A coworker made a joke in the break room. Something about Ryan being the guy who changes locks instead of facing problems. Ryan didn't bite. He just stirred his coffee, eyes steady, and said, "Funny thing about locks. They keep the wrong people out." The room went quiet after that. One evening, Brooke herself sent a message, long and venomous. "You ruined my sister's life. You'll regret what you did to her. Everyone knows what kind of man you really are now." Ryan read it twice, then dragged it into the same folder as everything else. Receipts. If they wanted a war of words, they'd have to fight themselves in the mirror. He wasn't giving them ammunition. Instead, he booked an appointment with a lawyer a buddy recommended. Small office, wood-paneled walls. A man who looked like he'd been bulldozing nonsense for 30 years straight. Ryan laid the folder on his desk and explained everything. Short, sharp, no embellishment. The lawyer flipped through the documents, nodding. "You've done most of my job for me," he said finally. "Keep logging everything. Don't respond to provocation. If they cross the line, we'll be ready." Ryan left the office with a business card in his wallet and a different kind of weight in his chest. Not fear, not anger, but assurance. He wasn't alone in this. He had facts, he had counsel, and he had discipline. At night, sitting on his couch, he scrolled through Emily's public posts. Not out of curiosity, out of necessity. Her captions dripped with self-pity. "Sometimes the people you trust the most betray you the deepest." Hundreds of likes, sympathetic comments. She was playing her role perfectly. But Ryan didn't comment, didn't counter. He saved screenshots, time-stamped, and filed them. The more noise they made, the quieter he became. That silence wasn't a weakness. It was a strategy. People who burn hot run out of fuel. People who keep steady outlast the fire. By Friday, the smear campaign had lost some of its shine. Friends who'd rushed to Emily's side stopped posting about it. Co-workers quit with the jokes. Even Brooke's rage slowed down. Because here's the truth. Victims who shout too loud eventually sound like performers, and performers without an audience fade out. Ryan poured himself a coffee, leaned on the balcony railing, and let the city noise drift up. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't even surprised. When people lose control, they try to rewrite the story. But stories don't change when the evidence is stacked neat and airtight. And he had evidence for days. 2 weeks after the smear campaign fizzled, a thick white envelope arrived in Ryan's mailbox. Cheap stationery, budget law firm letterhead, paragraphs of overblown language. He slid it open with the same steady hand he'd use on a stubborn box of parts. The letter accused him of wrongful eviction, theft of personal property, and emotional distress. Demands followed: compensation for the car, reimbursement for living expenses, and the veiled threat of further legal action if he didn't comply. Ryan read it once, then again. The words didn't sting. They clattered, hollow and desperate, like loose bolts in a dryer. He set the letter on the table, poured himself a cup of coffee, and picked up his phone. An hour later, he was back in the paneled office across from his lawyer. The older man leaned back in his chair, glasses sliding down his nose as he read the letter. When he finished, he let out a chuckle that carried no humor. "Amateurs," the lawyer muttered. "They're hoping you scare easy and throw money at them. Don't." Ryan slid the folder across the desk. Lease in his name, car title, bill of sale, screenshots of Emily with Jordan on their island getaway, timestamps clear as daylight. Messages from Brooke, the noise complaint dismissed by the landlord. Every lie stacked neatly against the truth. The lawyer tapped the pile. This is what wins. No noise. Not sob stories. Paper. That night, Ryan sat in his apartment while the lawyer drafted a reply on heavy, watermarked paper. No insults. No theatrics. Just cold precision. Proof that the apartment lease was solely in Ryan's name. Proof that the Mazda CX-5 was titled, purchased, and sold entirely by Ryan. Proof that Emily herself requested space and no contact, supported by her own text. Screenshots of Emily on vacation with Jordan during the exact week she claimed distress. A closing warning: further harassment or defamatory claims would result in countersuit. Ryan read the draft before it was sent. Each sentence landed like a hammer on a nail, straight, undeniable, final. He signed off without hesitation. A week of silence followed. No texts, no knocks, no new smear posts. Then word started trickling in, not from Emily, but from the edges. A mutual friend mentioned she was back at her parents' house. Someone else said Brooke and Emily weren't speaking. Something about money, something about lies catching up. And Jordan? His name stopped appearing in captions altogether. Whatever reunion they'd bragged about had burned out as fast as it lit. Ryan didn't gloat. He didn't need to. Sitting in his living room, walls freshly repainted in a shade he picked himself, he understood the kind of victory that doesn't need applause. He hadn't screamed, hadn't chased, hadn't begged. He'd simply stood still while the storm spent itself. The legal silence was the loudest sound of all. He slipped the lawyer's reply into his folder, labeled the sleeve final, and filed it away. The folder itself had grown thick over the weeks. Receipts, records, evidence. But to him it wasn't clutter. It was armor. Every page a shield. Every date and signature a reminder that truth doesn't flinch when challenged. That evening he walked down to the lot. The empty space where Emily used to park still sat blank. A slab of asphalt that told its own story. He breathed in the cool night air. Steady. Controlled. Facts had defeated fiction. And fiction had gone silent. 2 months later, Ryan stood in the middle of his living room, paint roller in hand, a fresh coat drying on the walls. The old beige, Emily's pick, was gone, replaced by a calm slate gray he'd chosen without debate, without compromise. The room looked different, sharper, cleaner, felt like his in every sense of the word. The apartment was quiet, but not the heavy, suffocating silence of that first week. This was the kind of quiet a man earns. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the building settling, the sound of his own breath moving steady and unhurried. He set the roller down, wiped sweat from his forehead, and looked around. The couch was in a new spot, angled toward the window where the light came in strongest in the mornings. The table held only what he needed: a notepad, a coffee mug, and a set of keys that opened doors belonging only to him. The boxes were gone. The car was gone. The noise, the drama, the accusations, all gone. What remained was a space reclaimed, shaped by his hands and guarded by his boundaries. Ryan poured himself coffee, black and strong, and leaned against the counter. He thought about the arc of it all: the text that cracked open dinner, the Instagram betrayal, the locks, the car, the confrontation at the door, the cardboard boxes carried away, the smear campaign, the cheap legal tricks. Each move had felt like a fight at the time, but looking back, it wasn't a brawl. It was a process, step by step, cut by cut, until everything false was removed and only truth remained. He realized then that his revenge had never been about shouting her down or making her bleed in the court of public opinion. The real revenge was in restraint, in giving her exactly what she asked for, no more, no less: space. She wanted it, and he honored it harder and sharper than she ever imagined. Now she had all the space in the world. Space outside his locked doors. Space in an empty parking spot. Space back at her parents' house, where the story she told no longer lined up with the life she lived. And Ryan, he had space too, but he was filled with peace. He took his mug to the window and looked out at the city. The evening light stretched long across the lot, glinting off his Chevy's hood. The spot beside it was still empty, and he found it satisfying in a way words couldn't touch. It wasn't eerie anymore. It was proof. Proof that he hadn't just survived the storm. He'd rebuilt after it, stronger than before. Ryan raised the mug slightly, a silent toast to the quiet. Then he turned back to the freshly painted walls, the room that was his again, and breathed deep. The chapter was closed. The space was infinite, and it was his alone.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.